Hey everyone, this is Quentin Figueroa with SlayerMint.com, and in this video I want to talk to you about how Bitcoin is currently in a bubble. Now, right off the bat, I've been a big fan of Bitcoin. I found out about it when it was like $3 to $5 in 2012, and I found it kind of interesting, but like I think a lot of people wasn't really sure what to make of it. And then in 2013, I finally got around to buying it when it was around like $45. I bought my first Bitcoin, and I thought that was pretty awesome. And I really started to see the viability of it and really thought it was a very interesting and important technology and thing in our lives. So I decided to start building a business around it. So in 2013, I started a payment processing company and have been kind of still doing that type of thing to this day. So I'm a big proponent of Bitcoin. I'm, as big of a fan as anyone. I get it. I really like what it's doing, and I think it's an awesome thing for humanity. So by me saying that Bitcoin is currently overvalued, that's not me saying like I'm anti-Bitcoin or I think Bitcoin sucks, because I don't. I think Bitcoin's awesome, and I think in the long term Bitcoin is going to be really big, much bigger than it currently is. I just think that right now it's a bit overvalued. It's going to go down. This has happened before, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you guys about and share my perspective with. So if we look into the history of Bitcoin, we can see the price as, it was started in 2009. We've seen how the price has kind of evolved since then and what's happened. And right now the price is over $7,000 USD, and it's been rising really fast lately. We've been seeing it go from like 4,000 to 7,000 in like a month or so. So it's going pretty quick. And this has happened before. This isn't the first time Bitcoin has had a sharp rise in price, right? So if you check out this graph here, you'll see this is the price of Bitcoin from 2009 to 2017. And there are quite a few spikes. So obviously we have the big spike that's going on now. It started around maybe April of 2017 or so. And you can see now it's over 7,000. But then there's two other spikes here that are interesting and worth talking about. And that is in April of 2013. You'll see a little spike. And then if you go over to about December of 2013, you'll see like a bigger spike. And these were two spikes that happened in Bitcoin's history where it was overvalued, and everybody was buying Bitcoin. Everybody was getting super into it, which is great and awesome. As it's getting adopted, this kind of stuff happens. But then, of course, markets correct and that kind of thing happens. So if we look at this next graph here, I'll zoom in a little bit. And this right here is checking from, January 2013 till January 2015. So we have a 2-year blip in Bitcoin's history. So like I was saying, you have this first spike in April of 2013. And this is kind of where Bitcoin first caught mainstream traction. And it reached about 250 here, the price. And then from that, everybody was like, okay, the Bitcoin's the real deal. It's never going to go down. This is kind of Bitcoin has finally caught mainstream attention. And then shortly thereafter, you can see the price drops. It goes back down to, it went down to about $20, I believe. So it went down pretty low. And then, of course, at that point, everybody's like, oh, okay, Bitcoin's dead. So much for that. That was fun. Bitcoin's over. But then once again, it starts to catch on again. Now, when we move over to November and December 2013, this kind of coincided with the whole Mt. Gox issue, where apparently Mt. Gox was hacked and the price was possibly somewhat manipulated, but at the same time people were buying, and this was like another hype phase for Bitcoin. So in November, December 2013, similar type thing happens again. You see the price start to spike. This is like a really, really big spike. This looks like a bubble, right? And everybody's saying like this is, normal. Bitcoin is finally caught on. This is the real deal, and Bitcoin's here to stay. And yeah, it's true. Bitcoin is the real deal, but it takes time to grow, and markets need to correct and that type of thing. So the price goes up. It hit about 1250 at this time. This graph's a little bit off because it's rounding, I think, like 4 days or whatever. But it hit about 1250, and that was a new all-time high, obviously. And everybody's like, okay, Bitcoin is awesome. I got to get in. I got to get some Bitcoin before it's too late. And then, of course, the price crashes. And you can see that clearly by the graph. It goes down, drops down to around 600. And, everybody's like, okay, Bitcoin's dead. But then it has, as most bubbles do, it has like kind of a rebound phase. Everybody's like, oh, no, that wasn't real. It's going to go up again. People start buying, goes up to about 800 or so, but then it doesn't really have much momentum. And that's kind of the end of that. And Bitcoin has a slow death for the next year or so. It just kind of keeps going down, and then eventually Bitcoin finally finishes off around $200 or so. And at that point, everybody's like, okay, Bitcoin's dead. This kind of thing's never going to happen again. This is the end. And, that is kind of how it goes, right? And I think right now in 2017, we're in a very similar situation. Around April or so, the price hit about 1,000. And I think around that point, it hit kind of like a psychological point where they're like, oh, wow, this is close to the last high of 1,250. It's broken 1,000 again. That psychologically is like a satisfying number. This means that, it's reached kind of that minimum gauge that I want to see. So, it gets kind of more attention at that point. That's around April of this year. And then, from there, it goes up to 2,000. And then everybody's like, oh, wow, okay, I think this might be it. I need to get some Bitcoin. And people slowly, as the price goes up, just like they have before, and just like they do with any bubble or any type of thing, it's like, I got to get in. I got to get me some of that. So it starts to go up, and then the price hits around 3,500 or so, or whatever, maybe close to 4,000. That's around August, and we have kind of this Bitcoin fork thing happening with Bitcoin Cash. So that's August 1st. The Bitcoin Cash fork happens. People are kind of waiting on the sidelines, not really sure if, what's going to happen. Is Bitcoin Cash going to take off? Is that going to replace Bitcoin? So nobody's, the price is kind of just chilling, seeing what's going to happen. And then, the fork happens, no real issues, everything's fine. And then people load back into Bitcoin and the price continues to rise. And ever since then, it's been rising. And here we are today at 7,000. It went from like 4,000 to 7,000 in a month or so. And it's been rising really quick. Once it broke 5,000, I thought that was going to pretty much be I thought once it broke 5,000, it was going to hit 6,000 and then turn around and kind of go down. But it hasn't. It's kept going. It's now at 7,000. I think any time now it's probably going to turn around and go back down, similar to what has happened in the past. But of course, we'll see. But let me show you a graph here to show you kind of what a bubble looks like. Okay, so if we're looking at this graph right here, you'll see that you have different phases and whatnot. And Bitcoin goes like almost perfectly to match this, some of the bubble phases. So if you go back to the December 2013, you'll see that it had, this exact same type of thing going on. You have it to where, it's slowly growing. You have kind of a phase where people are getting used to it, seeing the price go up again. Okay, maybe Bitcoin's starting to recover. And then you have this kind of mania phase where now it's getting, media attention. People are getting enthusiastic and now they're kind of getting greedy. Like, okay, I need to get into this. I need to make some money. And so that's what happens. And then, it starts at the top. People are like, okay, it's overvalued. Everybody's like, no, screw you. It's not overvalued. This is a new paradigm. This is something new. This is, this is a new technology. This is what it's supposed to be. This is what's happening. And then the price starts to drop. And then people are in denial, like, oh, no, it's going to come back. It's going to recover. And, that's what happens. So then it, goes up a little bit again. And people are like, see, it's recovered. We're back to normal. And then, of course, it tanks. And that is the exact graph of what is going on in a bubble. This is what a graph for a bubble looks like. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing for something to go into a bubble, but it's something to kind of recognize and see so that you can, kind of prepare yourself and plan accordingly. And that's kind of what I want to go through and talk about a little bit with this video. So, okay, so why is the price of Bitcoin going up, especially now? Why is it rising so rapidly? Okay, well, nobody really knows that exactly. I mean, you kind of have ideas. I have kind of some thoughts on why that might be, but nobody exactly knows. Nobody clearly knows. There's obviously tons of variables. Why does any market go up? Why does any type of asset class go up? And why does, a business go up in value? There's different reasons and people have different theories and, kind of hard to say. In general, things go up because they're more valuable, because people want them more and, they're necessary and they have utility, right? So Bitcoin, obviously, there's kind of the short-term way to look at it. Like right now, why is it going up? And in the long term, in the short term, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. It seems more like a hype type thing. But if you look at the long term, why is Bitcoin going up? that makes a lot more sense, right? And there's kind of, like maybe four main reasons why I think it's going up in the long term. You have how it's just a superior currency in many ways. It allows you to do cheap transactions and whatnot. So it's a superior currency with great utility. It clears very fast and for very cheap for the most part. And if Bitcoin, because I know there has been some kind of transaction fee issues and whatnot, but I'm kind of in a way talking cryptocurrencies in general, because if not Bitcoin, there's another way you could do a cryptocurrency and have different ways to do transaction fees to where it's cheaper. But even with the problems Bitcoin's had with transaction fees, it's still relatively cheap. Maybe not so much for a smaller transaction of like $50, but something like $1 million, you can send $1 million for like 5 cents, not an issue. So anyway, so Bitcoin, it's going up because it has great utility. It's an alternative to kind of the conventional financial markets. It's cheap and fast. You can get a payment to somebody anywhere instantly. It's not an issue like that. It has a fixed supply, which is very important to a lot of people, including myself. So it's not prone to inflation like, a government fiat currency where government can just create more money if they need it, which then, devalues everybody else's currency. You can't do that with Bitcoin. It has a fixed amount, so if anything, it's deflationary and the value of it goes up with time just by you sitting there holding it. And then, of course, I think the most important part is decentralized. So it's on an open, decentralized blockchain where no one entity controls it, and it's controlled through mathematics and through multiple people mining blocks and this type of thing. So it's not controlled by any one entity. And that's kind of the most important part because it can't be stopped, but it's also more trustworthy and harder to manipulate. So these are some of the main reasons why it's going up. People are using it and it has value, and it's just a good technology. That's why things gain in value. So in the long term, this stuff is driving the price. But then what happens with this is we kind of have these short-term spikes that happen, and that's kind of normal. That happens in markets. You see that with real estate, you see it with oil, you see it with gold. That kind of thing happens in markets. That's how adoption happens. That's how markets work. You have kind of imbalances that happen. Sometimes things go up a little bit too fast, and then they get corrected, and then life goes on. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different with certain markets like real estate and whatnot because government manipulation, that kind of stuff. I get all that, but in general, you're still, even in a free market scenario, you're going to have price fluctuations and things that correct and that need to be fixed and that kind of stuff. Not everybody is going to be investing rationally or investing optimally. So these things happen and it's normal. And that is kind of what's going on with Bitcoin right now. And I'm pretty sure that most people are buying right now, not necessarily for the utility of it, but just because the price is going up. And, people are excited about it. And they, a lot of people like Bitcoin and they do think in the long term it's going to go well. And, maybe they've been holding out a little bit and they're like, I'll get Bitcoin at some point, maybe when I have a little bit more money or whatever. But now it's starting to move. So like, well, I don't want to be too late. I better get on before it's, $50,000 and I can't get, I'm going to lose out on a lot of money. So I think that's part of it too. People, they want to see it do well and they're kind of excited and they're hyped about it and they want to get in before it's too late. But I mean, that is kind of what's driving it to a degree, I think. Now, I'm on board with long-term it being very big. I think it could easily hit $50,000 or $100,000. I don't think that's very unrealistic at all, especially at this point. Now, in order for that to happen, though, we're going to need a market cap, of about $1 trillion or so. Right now, the market cap for Bitcoin is about 120 billion. The market cap for all cryptocurrencies is about 200 billion. So right now, 120 billion for Bitcoin. We need to get to about $1 trillion. And, if we want to go further, $10 trillion market cap. And to get there, that's going to require a lot more resources, a lot more money, and that's going to take some time to get there. I don't think you can necessarily force that quickly. Things take, even Bitcoin, which is growing extremely fast, it takes time for adoption to happen and for it to grow. And that's with any business because markets need to correct. Nothing goes up indefinitely. Nothing only goes up in value. Things go up in value, but then they come down in value and they correct. They meet kind of the real world valuation of what the actual value should be, what the market actually shows it is, not what this kind of hype and this irrational, not necessarily irrational, but just kind of forced price that doesn't necessarily take into account the real variables of what actually should be making up the price, right? So people are just buying to make money. That's not actually really why it should be going up. So it's going to actually correct at some point, just like any other financial market. So that's what we need to kind of look at with this type of thing. And again, this already happened in April 2013 with Bitcoin. Very similar scenario. December 2013, again, very similar scenario. So this type of stuff isn't uncommon to Bitcoin. It's happened 2 times before, and I think it's happening right now, and I think in the future it's probably going to happen again. So this kind of stuff happens, and it's perfectly normal, and it's not a bad thing. Markets get out of sync, and they need to be you need to let the market forces kind of rebalance it and let reality come back in and set the price at a more stable and more rational value. So yeah, I'm excited about it too, but we're just not quite at the mass adoption. And it's interesting because it's similar to what happened with the housing bubble in the U.S. in 2007, 2008 when it crashed. It's a very similar type thing. In 2007, I mean, it's different in the sense, of course, that government was creating loans for people and people could buy homes that they couldn't afford, that kind of thing. But it's similar in the sense of the hype and then the people just buying because they want to make money. People are like, I can buy a home and 6 months from now I make $50,000 on my home and refinance it, sell it. It's like, this is freaking sweet. It's easy money. And you're seeing an easy money type scenario with Bitcoin, right? In the housing market in 2007, in leading up to that, 2004, 5, 6, you have people that were formerly unemployed. Now all of a sudden they're a mortgage broker. Now all of a sudden they're flipping homes and they're making lots of money, right? But it's not built on reality. It's not built on the actual real market forces. So eventually it's going to collapse. And that's what happened in the housing boom that was going on. And similar type thing is going to happen with Bitcoin. You have it to where, like with Bitcoin, if you go onto Reddit and read some of the thread, you have people that know nothing about Bitcoin that don't really get what's going on, just getting it just because they're like, I see that it's going up. I see that this is getting a lot of attention. I'm going to join in too. It's like, that's what happens with a bubble. That's what people are doing. When your grandma is buying Bitcoin, it's like, yeah, I get that mass adoption and that's going to have to happen at some point, but we're not quite there yet. We're getting there, but we're not there. And trying to force us to get there, it's good. It's not bad. I mean, we're kind of giving it another surge, but that surge now has to kind of just revalue a little bit. It's going to revalue higher than the mean has ever been, but it's still going to revalue lower. And that's kind of what happens. So it gets a shock. You have kind of newcomers and people coming in, which is obviously good. But now that shock needs to kind of correct and stabilize. And that's what a correction is. That's why it's overvalued. It just needs to stabilize. Okay, so another piece why the price could be kind of in a bubble right now. And what could be adding to this is the fact that it's kind of hard to get in and out of Bitcoin. So you kind of have cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, which are digital currencies, right? And then you have fiat currencies like the dollar, the euro, yen, government issued currencies. Kind of in contrast to that. So these two different camps. You have crypto digital and then you have fiat. Now when you want to get Bitcoin, you obviously go to an exchange, and you need to convert your fiat into crypto. And you have an exchange rate and you get whatever amount based on the whatever fiat amount you have. And then when you want to cash out and you want to withdraw, you then get an exchange rate again and you convert your crypto to fiat. And this is kind of how it works. And this is fine and all, and technically it's not a problem, and there's not issues with that. The issues are more on the legal side, the government side, because when you're talking about finance and currency, this is something that is obviously heavy regulated by the government. And that's not a bad thing. I get that they do that because you have a lot of criminality, illegal activities, lots of type of things like money laundering and whatnot that they need to kind of check up on. This is important to them. So when you're dealing with finance and currency, they want to know where your money's coming from, right? So when you're depositing in, it might not be that much of an issue because, the exchange or the cryptocurrency space, there's no government or governing body that cares, where did your fiat come from? They don't care. But when you're going from crypto to fiat, the government does care. They're like, okay, well, where did where did all this money come from? We want to know, where this $1 million came from. How did you get it? So you're much more accountable, and the government comes down on exchanges and make sure they follow certain regulations, like KYC regulations and different legal things that they must do to make sure that people aren't using them illegal and that people are following the rules of their relative respective country. So this is something that could be affecting it slightly, because say you have like $1 million and you want to withdraw that and convert it into fiat, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. You can't just do it all in one chunk. You can't go to an exchange, say, give me my $1 million and boom, it's done. It's like, that's not how it works. Sure, you can convert $1 million in an exchange to Bitcoin, and then you could you could convert $1 million worth of Bitcoin into USD or whatever, and you could hold it in the exchange, but now it's like, well, now you have the risk of keeping all your money in the exchange, and that's traditionally has had kind of a bad track record, and it's pretty risky to do. So you want to get it probably into a bank, or maybe you want to pull it out and move it into real estate or some other asset, but that's hard to do. It's like you can't do it all at once, so it's like, well, screw it, I'm not going to do it, or maybe I'll just do a little bit, but I won't do exactly the whole amount that I want to do. And so this, I think, has a little bit of an effect on the price, because it's easy to deposit in, which puts the price up, but it's hard to pull out, which keeps the price kind of from going down a little bit. And of course, a lot of people in Bitcoin don't want to sell, and it's a long-term thing for them, and they would much rather have their money in Bitcoin than fiat, like USD, because with Bitcoin, you're not losing your money to inflation. If anything, it's going up in value partially because of deflation. So it's like, well, I just want to have my money in Bitcoin anyway. And of course, I get that. That makes sense. But as prices go up, especially when they start to go up quickly, like we're seeing now, people do want to take profits. Some people are okay taking profits. They don't want to sell at all. But it's like, if it's gone from $1,000 to $7,000, somebody might be like, well, yeah, why not take 10% profits, and put that into some other asset, or put it into a business or something. It's like, that's fair. But the 10% of them might still be a lot of money. It might be $10 million. And that might be something that's still a pain in the butt to do. And they're just like, screw it, whatever. So I think this could be somewhat affecting. Again, not a big piece, but something to consider and think about. Another piece to look at would be the transaction volume. Now, traditionally, the transaction volume has somewhat coincided with the price of Bitcoin. And this, of course, makes sense because, transactions is what Bitcoin is about. You do transactions with it. And as more transactions happen, that means more people are kind of using it. So the adoption is going up, and as more people adopting it, people are going to need it. It's got only a set supply. It's not like fiat currency. You can't just inflate it. So people need Bitcoin, and if there's only so many Bitcoin, the price is going to go up. So the transaction volume is kind of interesting to look at. And now if we take a look at the graph here, we can see how this right here is the confirmed Bitcoin transactions per day. And you can see, it's obviously going up, and it kind of goes up with the price as you would expect. But then around April 2017 or so, towards the very end of the graph, you can see that the price kind of stops. It actually goes down a little bit maybe, but it's definitely not going up. So from April or so until now, the price has not, the transaction count per day has not necessarily been going up. So the transactions are somewhat slowing down. And now you have to ask yourself, well, why is this? Why are the transactions going down? And is that even important? And it's obviously not the only thing to look at, and there's a lot of reasons why it could be going on. And if you're somewhat involved and kind of follow the more management day-to-day stuff with Bitcoin, you kind of have insight on why this might be happening. For instance, the last year and a half or so, transaction fees have been a big problem with Bitcoin. Everybody knows that. The whole reason we have Bitcoin Cash is because the whole reason that fork happened was because of transaction fees. The way Bitcoin is handling that, and they're like, you guys need to, make the block size bigger. You guys need to change a few things to allow for, lower fees and this kind of stuff. So that whole split was based around this whole issue. So the transaction fee could be, playing into this, and that's why maybe there's less transactions. And it might not necessarily be a bad thing. For instance, because of, it could be argued that the transaction fee that you pay on Bitcoin is the price you pay to be on the most stable and secure blockchain. And sure, that makes sense. Maybe the utility of Bitcoin isn't so much as a transaction currency. Maybe it's like gold, right? And you use it more to transfer large sums of money securely and safely, and you store that in a safe and secure way. Maybe that's more the utility of it, but it's not transactions. Maybe transactions is more for Ethereum or Litecoin or Dash or some other cryptocurrency, right? So you kind of have this gold silver scenario that people have talked about, and that makes sense, right? If you have $50 and you want to send it to your friend and it costs $3 to send it to them on Bitcoin, you'll be like, well, that kind of sucks. What else could I do? You could go to Ethereum or Litecoin or Dash and maybe it costs like 2 cents, 3 cents. It's like, well, that's way cheaper. I'm just going to use that. But if you're trying to store a large sum of money, it might be better to keep that in Bitcoin rather than Ethereum, because the Bitcoin price traditionally has been a little bit more stable and kind of in an upward trend. So it's like, I'll keep my money there, but if I'm just going to do transactions and kind of use the utility of a digital currency, I'll use something else. And yeah, people are doing that, and that has happened. So that's another thing to consider with the transaction count. Transaction count, obviously, not everything, but it's still something to look at, and to think about. It could factor into this, obviously. And that's kind of what I'm saying. And if you actually look now with the transaction count with Ethereum, you can actually gain a little bit of insight into that too, I think. So here you can see that Bitcoin is in blue and Ethereum is in red, right? So this Bitcoin graph is the one we just looked at, transaction count. But then if you go over to Ethereum now, you can see that around the April area where Bitcoin kind of starts to sideline or decline, Ethereum is still continuing to go up. So people are continuing to transact in Ethereum. So that means people could possibly be using it for the reasons I said. It's cheaper, it's an alternative to Bitcoin, or just that people are adopting Ethereum for other reasons. But regardless, what this means is that if people are using Ethereum and they're transacting in it more, the price should be going up. But the price for Ethereum is not going up. I mean, it is going up, but in the past month or two, it's not going up the way Bitcoin is. Traditionally, it's kind of followed Bitcoin's price. Bitcoin goes up, Ethereum goes up. Bitcoin goes down, Ethereum goes down. But in the past month or two, since about 4,000 or so, when Bitcoin went to 4,000 and 7,000, Ethereum has remained at 300. It hasn't gone up like it should. And you have to ask yourself kind of why. There has to be a reason why that is, and I think that's kind of what I'm talking about here. Bitcoin is overvalued. Okay, so along those lines now, we can look at the Bitcoin dominance and kind of compare it and contrast to with other cryptocurrencies. Because since about the 4,000 mark, which was a month or two ago when Bitcoin was at 4,000, if you looked at its dominance relative to other cryptocurrencies, it was around like 40% or so. So you had, the whole cryptocurrency space with, 1,000 or so different cryptocurrencies. 40% of all the money in cryptocurrency was in Bitcoin. The other 60% was in everything else, Ethereum, Litecoin, Ripple, whatever. So you had 40% Bitcoin, 60% everything else. Now, within like a month or two, now that it's at 7,000, you have over 60% is in Bitcoin, and the other 40% or so in the other cryptocurrencies. So it's shifted. People have shifted from other cryptocurrencies into Bitcoin. And you have to, again, ask yourself why. That's something interesting to look at. The price is going up somewhat because people are going into Bitcoin. Why are they going into Bitcoin? Why are they shifting around, And I think it's kind of what I've been talking about is, there's this kind of this hype going around. People are excited and people kind of don't want to miss out. Other cryptocurrencies aren't moving the way Bitcoin is, so they're like, well, I want to get in and make some money and do something with this. Another really interesting, I think, part about this is people are moving their money into Bitcoin, like I said. And that means all of Bitcoin, including Bitcoin Cash, which is, I guess, it's a completely different currency, but I think to a lot of people, it's still kind of part of Bitcoin. So I think people that are probably less knowledgeable about Bitcoin, right, and less experienced with it, they see like Bitcoin's at 5,000, it's at 6,000. Whoa, this is crazy. Bitcoin's now at 7,000. They hear about it. They've heard about it before. They've heard about Bitcoin. They're like, now's the time to buy. I'm going to get in. So like, I'm going to buy Bitcoin. They look at it. They're like, dang, it's freaking $6,000 a coin. I can't afford that. Not knowing maybe that you can even buy it fractionally, that you could buy, $1 worth of Bitcoin and it's not a problem. But maybe they don't know that. They think you have to buy the whole thing at once. So they search for Bitcoin. Maybe they land on Bitcoin.com. They do a little bit of research. They see how Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. It's called Bitcoin. Maybe it's similar. Maybe it is Bitcoin. I'm going to get this Bitcoin Cash now. So they're like, okay, Bitcoin Cash, $300, $400. They're like, well, I missed the boat on Bitcoin, but at least Bitcoin Cash, it's still Bitcoin and I can at least, do something with that. So I'm going to get some Bitcoin Cash. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but it could be, and it kind of makes sense because, especially in like the last few days, even, Bitcoin Cash has gone from like 300 to 600, which is like a huge, sharp increase, like really quick. There could be a lot of reasons, obviously. Nobody fully knows. But I just find it interesting how Bitcoin, like all of Bitcoin, including Bitcoin Cash, is going up, especially Bitcoin Cash recently. Like Bitcoin Cash just started to go up, but everything else that doesn't have Bitcoin in the name is not going up. So it's like this is a Bitcoin thing only, including Bitcoin Cash. So you have to kind of ask yourself and like think like maybe there's something going on here. Maybe people, you have these like newbies coming in and they're like Bitcoin Cash, yes, I'll take that. They're like, they're researching it. Like Bitcoin, that's too expensive. Ethereum, I heard about that, but no. And then Ripple, what's that? And then they come in and like Litecoin, I don't know, I heard about it, but what's that? Bitcoin Cash, they're like, yeah, I could get that. Bitcoin Cash, let's do it. That could be going on. So, yeah. The thing is, though, other currencies probably should be going up with this rise in price also. I guess they just didn't get the memo that it's time for cryptocurrencies to go up. But the fact that that Bitcoin is diverging in price with them, I think shows that Bitcoin itself, not cryptocurrency, but just Bitcoin specifically is overvalued in Bitcoin Cash because they're diverging kind of from this norm mean of cryptocurrency. They're kind of creating their own little market of hype. And I get it, and like I said, it's not a bad thing. But that's probably what's going on a little bit. And if we look at the graphs, I think it kind of becomes a little bit more clear. So if you look at here, this right here is the Bitcoin price graph, which I showed you towards the beginning, and this is just kind of a baseline to look at, right? So that's what's going on with Bitcoin. If we move over to the second most popular cryptocurrency, I'm going to go through the 6 most popular. Ethereum is the second most popular cryptocurrency, and this is a graph. The green line is in the price of USD. This is the same graph that you saw Bitcoin priced in USD, but then this gold orange one, this is priced in Bitcoin. And so it kind of shows you relative to Bitcoin what the price is. And with Ethereum, obviously, you can see it's followed very, very closely, has a very close correlation with Bitcoin until about, here it looks like about July or so, right? And you can see it starts to diverge, and now, price relative to Bitcoin is going down. So you kind of have it to where, and even if you look at the USD price, it hasn't been going up. It's just kind of been hanging around 300 or so, which is different than what's happening with Bitcoin. We move over to Ripple, third most popular. Or sorry, no, Bitcoin Cash is now the third most popular. Move over to Bitcoin Cash. You can see here it follows, obviously very closely to Bitcoin, somewhat. But then you have this kind of spike, like I was saying, the last few days where it hits about 600 or so, which is kind of interesting because this is one of the few that is going up, similar to how Bitcoin is going up recently. Now we move over to Ripple. You can see it looks very similar to Ethereum, kind of, right? Same type of thing. It, it went up, and now, it's kind of diverging from Bitcoin, and it's kind of going down in price a little bit, right? Unlike Bitcoin. And then we move over to Litecoin, going up in price a little bit. I guess somewhat closer to Bitcoin. Still going down a little bit relative to Bitcoin, and it's still not going up nearly to the degree that Bitcoin has been going up. And then we move over to Dash. It's been going up, but then again, the last month or so, it has started to go down again, unlike Bitcoin. So it's just kind of interesting to look at this stuff. It's not an exact science. I'm just kind of giving my thoughts on what's going on, trying to kind of get a grasp of possible things, and share my take on it. But ultimately, it's up to you to take what I'm saying, filter it with what you believe in your thoughts, and make an educated decision from there. Okay, so what do I think is going to happen with the price of Bitcoin? What is my prediction? Well, like I said, nobody knows. I don't know. Nobody, I don't think, fully knows. People have kind of ideas and hunches and that kind of thing, and you can look at different data and things like I have. and kind of try to come up with some type of theory or assessment, hypothesis of what might happen, but nobody fully knows. But let me give you my take. I just want to kind of get it out there. I think it'll be interesting to make a prediction, see what happens. I could end up being completely wrong. Price could continue to go up, obviously, and never necessarily return. I mean, I kind of doubt it because most markets correct, but I could be wrong. Who knows? So let me give you my prediction. So, like I said, with the history of Bitcoin, this kind of thing has happened before. So you've had a similar scenario. Price has gone up, and there's been a lot of hype, and then it's kind of corrected and come back down. So I think we're going to see a kind of similar pattern, right? So I think in the next month or so, probably before the new year, but if not, slightly after the new year, probably within the next month, maybe 2 months, we're going to see the price start to come down. It's going to start to kind of correct and come down, and it might hit, well, I think it'll hit at least, 5,000, maybe 4,000 or so, somewhere down there, and at that point, it might turn around again, kind of have a rebound a little bit, maybe go back up to 6,000 or so, and people think like, okay, that was just a blip, it's going to recover, everything's back, everything's going to go back to normal. Similar to what happened in December 2013, right? I think something like that could happen. And then from there, though, so that'll be like within the next 3 months or so. So it'll start to collapse within the next month or so, I think. It'll bottom out a little bit, 4 or 5, maybe go back to 6 or so. But it's just, that'll be within the next 3 months or so. And then from there, what I think will happen is it'll start now a slower descent back into oblivion like it has before, right? So now it's going to start to slowly go down, and we'll see it hit, 4,000. It might hit 3,000. It might hit 2,000. And people are just going to start to lose faith in it again and just say like, okay, Bitcoin's dead. Yeah, I was right. Bitcoin's dead. All these people were wrong. They're crazy. Bitcoin could never do well. And, it's going to go quiet. This is what happened in like 2015 or so. It was just really quiet. Nobody talked about Bitcoin, and it was just kind of doing its thing, but building. People were, using it, and it was shaking out, a lot of the bad money and this type of stuff. This is what happens in financial markets. So I think it's going to become a lot more hated. And not hated, but it's just people are going to forget about it again, right? It's not going to be in the media, and there's going to be less hype, and it's going to go down. Yeah, like I said, I think it'll probably hit at least 3,000. It could go down to 2. It could even go down to 1,000. I mean, this is not uncommon. It's not uncommon for Bitcoin to make huge, steep changes like this. And again, if it hits 1,000, that's not a bad thing. If 1,000 was the new norm, that's fantastic. And again, in 2009, it was worth 0. Right now, it's worth 7,000. If it's worth 1,000, that's insane. That's freaking so cool. And again, this is like short term. Long term, I think it's going to go to 10,000. I think it's going to go much higher. No problem, But in the short term, this I think is what's going to happen, right? So anyway, I think it's going to go back down to 2,000 to 3,000-ish maybe. And people are going to be like, not talking about Bitcoin, and it's going to just not be a cool thing. And this is when you buy. This is when you get back in when nobody's talking about it. Everybody's fearful that it's never going to go up again. You get why it's going to go up and the value and utility of it and the long-term vision of it. So you buy back in at this point. This is when you buy Bitcoin, when nobody's talking about it and everybody's out. When it's reached a bottom, right? That's when you get in. That's when nobody's going to want to get in. Because it's like, why would I get into Bitcoin? That died. It was high, it's over. It's like, no, get in. That's when you get in. So yeah, that's what's going to happen. And yeah, so like, again, in April 2013, right, Bitcoin was at around 250. Nobody ever thought it'd hit 20 bucks again, but it did. It's saying when it was at 250 that it's in a bubble, what is that? Is it bad to be accurate? Is that anti-Bitcoin to say that it's overvalued when it's accurate statement and you predicting what happens? In December 2013, when it's at 1250, you're like, okay, it's in a bubble, guys. Bitcoin needs to correct. Is that anti-Bitcoin? Is it bad to be accurate? It went from 1250 back down to, over like a year or two, 200. It's like, that's what happened. It's like that kind of stuff can happen. So for it to go from 7,000 to even 1,000, that's not crazy. That can happen. I don't know if it will happen, but based off kind of past history of it and the way it was a similar type hype scenario, I think it could do something like that. So, something to look about. There's a similar pattern going on to all this, similar variables. So I think it might be worth considering. And it reminds me of a quote by one of the best investors in the world, Warren Buffett, when he says, quote, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." And I think he's exactly right about that. It's a very good quote, because the average person, not the best investor, not the best at business, the average person is not there. They think average, and average intelligence isn't going to be the kind of intelligence that brings you to make a lot of money in smart investments, where you diverge from average intelligence in a superior way. I mean, right? So the average person thinking that, you can't follow that. So that's why he's kind of saying go against the average, go against the norm of what people want to do if you want to be rich. I mean, a lot of people talk about stuff like that. So I think Buffett's right with that, and I think you can apply that same type of thinking to Bitcoin. But of course, he's wrong in this quote. And at least in my opinion, he's wrong. He says, quote, "Stay away from it," which is Bitcoin. "It's a mirage, basically. The idea that it has some huge intrinsic value is a joke in my view," end quote. So I think Buffett's wrong in that. And this is from the same guy who doesn't invest in tech companies because he doesn't know anything about technology, which is fine. Stick with what you know. But he obviously doesn't know technology. He would have told you to stay away from the internet and to stay away from Amazon or from Google or from Apple. So it's like, maybe not Apple, but again, he's not a tech guy. So, Bitcoin is a technology. If you understand the technology, you obviously you can discard, stuff like that. Okay, so that is what's going on. I'm not saying that, I'm not anti-Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin. I think it's like the most important kind of innovation permeating through society right now. I get that. I love it. So me trying to be accurate in my assessment isn't anti-Bitcoin. It's just me trying to be, accurate to better see kind of what's going on and understand Bitcoin, and to, prepare for it, to get the most out of it. So that's all. So to summarize, I just think there are kind of too many anomalies going on, especially since around April 2017. If you look at lots of different data points, like I do kind of day in and day out, because I'm in the Bitcoin industry, I care a lot about it. So I'm kind of seeing I look at a lot of different angles on it. I see kind of the, different variables. And when you're looking at all these different data points, if something looks off, you kind of see it. You understand kind of trends and patterns. And when something deviates, it kind of throws a red flag, and you like, this seems kind of weird. And I've been seeing it in different ways, kind of like with the stuff I've been talking about, to where, I figured I should probably say something, give my take, because it just seems off. And I think, other people kind of feel the same way, or kind of see the same type of thing. So yeah, I wanted to share that. And obviously, I'm not an expert. I'm not a day trader. I'm not really into day trading or that kind of stuff. I do enjoy finance and business. I like more long-term stuff, right? That's why I like Bitcoin, and I like it from a long-term perspective. I see it doing really well in the long term. Short-term stuff, I really don't care. In fact, I'm not the type of person that wants to sell my Bitcoin and try to take advantage of this kind of stuff. I just don't care that much. I care more about the long term, but I'm still trying to kind of figure out what is going on in the short term and kind of make sense of it all, because it's still interesting stuff, and it's good to know. So yeah, I could be wrong. It could keep going up. Who knows? But I just wanted to give my take and see, because nothing goes up forever. Not even the best businesses, when Google is coming out, or Apple, these companies, they do well, but eventually they have to correct. Profits are taken, this kind of stuff. It's like nothing goes up forever. And Bitcoin is the same way. It can't go up forever, and it has to correct, and this kind of stuff like I've been talking about. And it's not to say that Bitcoin doesn't have a bright future, because it most certainly does. And I'll even go so far as to say it might not be Bitcoin that has a bright future, because, things could change. But in general, the cryptocurrency space, the decentralized open blockchain aspect of Bitcoin, whether it lives on through Bitcoin or something else, that does have a bright future. And that's going to start to ripple its way into the financial markets and totally compete against the traditional financial institutions. And that is going to be a really interesting and important thing. And that's where you're going to start to see, the trillion, 10 trillion market cap start happening, where it is now getting kind of this mainstream viability, to where it's really serious, because we're still relatively early. I mean, it's getting traction, but we still have a long way to go, right? And it's interesting because it reminds me kind of Simba in the movie The Lion King. If you've seen it, there's a part where he's singing, like, how he just can't wait to be king. And he's getting all excited, he's anxious, and he's kind of like, I guess, naive a little bit, he's not quite ready. And you have the bird Zazu sitting there telling him, he's like, Simba's like, I can't wait to be king. And Zazu's like, not yet. He's like, you're not ready, And that is exactly, I think, what's going on with Bitcoin. Like, it can't wait to be king. All the people who support it, like myself, they're really into it. They're happy about it, so they want to push it as much as possible. But it's not yet, right? The price is high, but this isn't it yet. It's like, it's gonna correct. Give it some time. It's getting there, but it's not king yet. It will be king, but not yet, right? So just hold on. Let's enjoy the ride, and let's continue to build this thing out one coin at a time. So thank you very much for listening, everyone, and have a great day.